All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Philadelphia City Council's Committee on Streets and Services. I note that the hour has come. Before we start, just want to wish a happy Mother's Day to all the mothers in the room.
Thank you.
Mr. Pullen, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Ahmad. Here. Councilmember Bass.
Present.
Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember Harity.
Present.
Councilmember Squilla.
Present.
Councilmember Young.
Present. Thank you, Mr. Pullen. Also joining us is Councilmember Rue Landau. I note for the record that a quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. This is a public hearing of the Committee on Streets and Services considering testimony on bill numbers 240119, 240183, 240184, 240191, 240221, 240239, 240240, 240243, 240250, 240282, 240301, 240302, 240328, 240329, 240331, 240334, and 240335. The chair recognizes Vice Chair Squilla for a motion on bill number 240328.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the request of the sponsor, Councilmember Gautier, I move that bill number 240328 be withdrawn.
Can I get a second?
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded that bill number 240328 be withdrawn. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. The motion carries and bill number 240328 has been withdrawn. Mr. Pullen, would you please read the title of the first bill?
Bill number 240221, entitled Authorizing the Procurement Commissioner to Enter into a Contract for the Construction of a Sewer and Appurtenant Work Required to Provide Public Sewer Service in the 600 and 700 blocks of Herndon Street under certain terms and conditions.
Mr. Pullen, would you please call the next witness to testify on this bill?
The first witness to testify is Laura Copeland, Assistant Deputy Commissioner for the Philadelphia Water Department.
Good afternoon. Could you please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony?
Sure. My name is Laura Copeland. Good afternoon, Chairman Young and members of the Committee on Streets and Services. I am Laura Copeland, Assistant Deputy Commissioner for Education, Community Engagement, and Government Affairs for the Philadelphia Water Department. I'm here to testify in support of Bill number 240221, sponsored by Councilmember Jones, authorizing the Procurement Commissioner to enter into a contract for the construction of a sewer and appurtenant work required to provide public sewer service in the 600 and 700 blocks of Hendron Street. The impacted properties on these blocks of Hendron Street are currently served by private septic tanks, which are reaching the end of their service life and will require the installation of a public sewer as soon as possible to provide sanitary service to the properties. There is no access to the rear yards for septic tank repair, maintenance, or replacement, and the property size does not allow for proper septic tank installation. If unaddressed, this situation has the potential to result in unsanitary conditions that could ultimately require condemnation of the properties. PWD respectfully requests that this bill be reported favorably out of this committee and that the rules of council be suspended to allow for first reading of this bill at the next session of City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Copeland. Are there any questions of this witness by members of the committee? Councilwoman Bass.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So my colleague and I, Councilman Squilla, were just conferring because we have a number of private sewers that have these same situations in which, you know, trying to get them onto the public line, essentially. And so can you talk a little bit about how we're able to do that, and this particular case and other situations, and how we might be able to bring more of these private sewers online to the public system? Because in parts of South Philadelphia, in parts of Germantown, they're very prevalent. So if you could just give us some insight into that.
That's it. Thank you for your question. I actually have a colleague here with me today. His name is Alex Vences. He'll be here to answer any questions with regard to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record and begin with testimony.
Yes, my name is Alex Vences. First off, to address this specific situation, there's currently no private sewer here. These are all on-lot systems, so septic tanks. So there's no sewer infrastructure in the street on Hendron Street right now. So I think when you refer to a private sewer, I think you're meaning a sewer that was built by private development, which has continued to serve properties that is not under the city's ownership or ownership of the water department. So in this specific case is a little different from that. So as far as addressing those private sewers, I'm not sure if that's really within the scope of this bill.
Okay, so I see. So these are, because they're septic systems, then that's separate from the sewer systems, the private sewer systems.
Correct, yeah.
But I guess, what we really want to figure out is how do we get some of these private sewer systems online?
Well, so we have done that for a number. I think Olive Street was a recent one. It was a street in Fairmount that was served by private sewers, and that came about as a similar unsanitary condition that was identified by one of the property owners. Okay. But I think typically how a lot of this happens is the residents form a petition, and they petition the city to get a public sewer built in the street. So the water department, as far as the water department assuming ownership of private sewers, assuming ownership of and maintenance of those sewers could be problematic because we don't know what standards those sewers were built to, which is why rather than assume ownership of private sewer, we would typically prefer to
Rebuild.
Build, with the backing of the community, which comes from the petition.
Well, I think that gathering a petition won't take any problem at all. I don't want to belabor the point because we have a lot of bills to hear today, but I just, I'm glad to hear that the water department is open to having these kinds of conversations about bringing these systems online. And I know we've talked about it in the past, and we've had varying degrees of conversation and success. But if you just did one recently, you said in Fairmount, then I have a lot of hope that, we can move some of those activities up to Germantown or over to South Philadelphia so we can see more of the same, because there's definitely a need. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilwoman. If you could send over to us, I guess, what the procedure is in order to have a private sewer come online or a new public sewer be built, that would be helpful for us as a council as we talk to our constituents.
Yes, we can do that.
I have one question too. When that happens and it's a private sewer, the private residents are responsible to rebuild that private sewer. But if it does become a public sewer, who pays for the installation of the public sewer? The city?
Public sewer would be paid by capital funds. There is an assessment fee per city for Philadelphia code that we levy to the property owners.
For each property would be assessed.
Excuse me?
Each property would be assessed a fee?
Yeah, it's based on your frontage to the street. I don't remember off the top of my head what the dollar amount is. I think it's the same amount as it was when it was originally written. So it has little consequence to actually impacting the total cost of the sewer at this day and age. But it is still per Philadelphia code that we assess those properties that cost. So That can be done either via, the contractor will collect those fees as they're building it, or I think there's the option to, charge the residents on their water
The
sewer
water bill.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
It's a case-by-case basis, so, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other questions for these witnesses? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Mr. Pullen, would you please read the title of the next bill?
Bill number 240240, titled Amending Section 9-203 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Sidewalk Sales to revise and clarify certain provisions related to city parks and recreation facilities and make related technical changes, all under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you. Mr. Pullen, please call the next witness.
The next witness to testify is Susan Slauson, Commissioner for the Department of Parks and Recreation.
Good afternoon, Ms. Lawson. Please state your name and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Susan Slauson. Good afternoon, Chair Young and members of the committee. My name is Susan Slauson, and I serve as the Commissioner of Parks and Recreation. Joining me today are Deputy Commissioner Susan Buck and Park Stewardship Administrator Elisa Rouse Esposito. I'm pleased to appear before you today on behalf of Mayor Parker's administration and the department in support of City Council Bill number 240240, introduced by Councilmember Gaudier. The bill revises and clarifies certain code provisions related to vending and PPR facilities. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, Philadelphia's parks have served as a lifeline to our residents in so many ways. Places to play, to serve, to connect, and among many other things, to vend. While the staff of PPR does a Herculean job, work providing desirable programming, safe facilities, and engaging outdoor spaces, the patrons of our park spaces have certain needs that can be best met by industrious sidewalk vendors who set up shop. While we celebrate their entrepreneurship and appreciate how their offerings can enhance the attractiveness of PPR facilities, we must provide a process for when and where people set up to vend and where around our parks. Transparent, reasonable, accessible, yes, but also acknowledging the needs of other vendors, other park users, pedestrians, and PPR staff. Councilmember Gaudier has worked closely with the previous and current administrations regarding the tensions in Clark Park that have risen from unauthorized and unregulated vending. The situation is chronic and acute, but by no means unique to that community. We have observed existing users being crowded out, sidewalks blocked, approved events undermined, and green spaces overrun. If enacted, Bill number 240240 would address those tensions by prohibiting vending on sidewalks on or adjacent to any PPR park, playground, or recreation center without the approval of PPR. The department can operate a single process, transparent, reasonable, and accessible for determining how people vend, when they vend, where, and under what conditions at our facilities. We believe that this legislation will achieve goals of both the Park Administration and Council of balancing fair, thoughtful access to commercial opportunities for small sellers. And this will also continue to enhance our public spaces. To that end, we ask you to support the creation of a single, balanced approach to regulating vending at PPR facilities by providing a favorable recommendation of Bill number 240240, and that the rules of council be suspended to allow first reading at the next session of the City Council. Thank you, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Slauson. I do have one question. So will these vendors, are they still required to have the city vending licenses and required business licenses in order to vend next to these rec centers?
Yes, and that's some of what we want to try to make sure that they are. There are vendors that go through the process and they get their license and they have everything they're supposed to have. And then there are other vendors that pretty much just show up. And we want to make sure that this is a fair opportunity for everyone. So they will be required.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for this witness?
I'm gonna try. I lost my voice.
Okay.
It's lost, and I'm gonna try to get this out.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Ahmad. Sorry.
A quick question about, do you maintain a list of vendors for a particular area? For example, not every vendor shows up every day. Is the license for a time period, or is it an annually renewed license? And if there are gaps in the schedule, do we allow other people to, or is it too much scheduling to do? How does that work?
I'm going to ask for, they're trying to decide who's coming, Elisa Esposado to come up. I will say that the process is you have to put in for the vending license within a certain amount of time. And based on when you put it in, that's when we will. So it's not, but I'll let Elisa, so I won't ramble. Go ahead, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, I'm Elisa Ruiz Esposito. I'm the Park Stewardship Administrator at Philadelphia Parks and Rec. So essentially what we're hoping to accomplish through this bill is that it just requires, they would go through all the same processes to have a sidewalk vending license. It just means there's another level of coordination with our department, and so they're getting a permit with our department for being on the sidewalk. This is to reduce conflicts between other permitted activities that are happening in the park the same day, and that just helps us manage the schedule.
So in other words, if there are new, new vendors coming up, they would not be able to get the license even if they wanted to, if it were full.
Oh, so in terms of our permitted markets, there are capacity limits to permitted markets, but it's depending on the park and the size available. Most of them have same-day walk-ups.
So they would be able, if there's space and they put in, because they're new, that would not prohibit them from getting, being able to permit in that area.
Yeah, this is how a lot of small businesses start off, so we don't want to dampen too much of that, so that's why I was asking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, that was a good question.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Council Member. Are any other questions for these witnesses? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Pullen, would you please read the title of the next bill?
Bill number 240302, titled Establishing a No Parking Regulation on the South Side of Wises Mill Road between Henry Avenue and Forbidden Drive, and also Bill number 240329, titled Establishing a No Parking Regulations on the West Side of North 34th Street between Indiana Avenue and Clearfield Street.
Thank you. Could you please call the next witness, Mr. Pullen?
The next witness to testify is Noel Marconi, Legislative Affairs Director for the Department of Streets.
Good afternoon, Ms. Marconi. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimonies on Bill number 240302 and 240329.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Young and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noelle Marconi, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill number 240302, introduced by Councilmember Jones. This bill establishes a no parking anytime regulation on the south side of Wise Mill Road between Henry Avenue and Forbidden Drive. The Streets Department has no objections to the proposed amendment and will place the signage within the 60 days. This concludes my testimony, and please answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Marconi. Are there any questions for this witness on Bill number 240302? Seeing none, Ms. Marconi, please proceed with your testimony on Bill number 240329.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Young and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noelle Marconi, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill number 240329, introduced by Councilmember Jones. This bill establishes a no parking anytime regulation on the west side of North 34th Street between Indiana Avenue and Clearfield Street. Department of Streets has no objections to the proposed bill and will place the signage within 60 days of the passage of this bill. This concludes my testimony, and please answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Marconi. Are there any questions of this witness on Bill number 240329? Seeing none. Is there any other testimony on Bill number 240329? Seeing none. Mr. Pullen, please read the title of the next bill.
Bill number 240282, titled Granting Permission to Germantown Jewish Center to Demarcate the Boundaries of a Germantown Arov District to construct and maintain a clear nylon cord and/or plastic tubes and other ancillary facilities, including a maximum of 10 poles along, over, and in certain public rights-of-way and city streets, and/or to attach such demarcation facilities to existing facilities owned by other entities authorized by other city ordinances, subject to such owner's consent, all under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Pullen. Please call the next witness for this bill.
The next witness to testify is Noel Marconi, Legislative Affairs Director for the Department of Streets.
Good afternoon, Ms. Marconi. Please state your name and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Young and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noel Marconi, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill number 240282, introduced by Councilmember Bass. This bill authorizes Germantown Jewish Center to demarcate the boundaries of a Germantown Arov district to construct and maintain a clear nylon cord and/or plastic tubes and other ancillary facilities, including a maximum of 10 poles along, over, and in certain public rights-of-way and city streets, and/or to attach such demarcation facilities to existing facilities owned by other entities authorized by other city ordinances, subject to such owner's consent. The Arov boundaries will make maximum use of existing physical features which can be used for demarcation of an Arov for the Germantown area consistent with Jewish religious law, including currently installed utility lines, existing walls and fences, and riverbanks and other embankments. In certain areas, such as existing boundaries, will be supplemented by a clear nylon cord to connect such existing features and create a continuous boundary, and in some areas, ledges may be mounted on utility poles subject to the owner's consent to create the property form of boundary lines prescribed by Jewish religious law. A maximum of 10 new poles and a few extensions of existing fence posts may be also erected. The Department of Streets is not opposed to this proposed Arov so long as all agreements with the appropriate city departments are executed. This concludes my testimony, and please answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Marconi. Are there any questions of this witness? Councilmember Bass?
Thank you. And thank you for your testimony today on behalf of the Streets Department. With everything going on right now, I believe it's important to address the diverse needs of our community, ensuring that all residents feel respected and included. And the establishment of an ERU is not just a matter of religious significance. It is about fostering an environment of understanding and accommodation for our Jewish neighbors. An ERU serves as a symbolic boundary, allowing Orthodox Jews to carry out certain activities on the Sabbath that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do outside of their homes. It is important to recognize the impact of what religious freedom does to help our communities grow together. By supporting the creation of an ERU, we are demonstrating that Germantown is a place where everyone's beliefs are respected. This ERU will also bring about a sense of unity and solidarity and contribute to the cultural richness of our neighborhood. We need to embrace diversity, not turn a nose to it. I want Germantown, and frankly the entire city, to be more vibrant and inclusive, a community for all. So I urge my fellow council members to support the establishment of an ERU in Germantown. Let us stand together in solidarity with our neighbors and uphold the values of religious freedom and inclusivity that define the city of Philadelphia. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Are there any other questions for this witness on this bill? Seeing none, are there any other members of the public wishing to testify on this bill? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Marconi. Mr. Pullen, could you please read the title of the next bill, please?
Bill number 240250, titled Authorizing the Installation, Ownership, and Maintenance of Various Encroachments Along the 700 block of Sansom Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19106, under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Pullen. Would you please call the next witness to testify on these bills?
The next witnesses to testify are Noel Marconi, Legislative Affairs Director for the Department of Streets, and Sarah Chu, Development Director for the City Planning Commission.
Good afternoon. Please state your name for the record and begin with your testimonies.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Young and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noelle Marconi, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill Number 240250, introduced by Councilmember Squilla. This bill authorizes the Center City District, CCD, to install, own, and maintain encroachments in the vicinity of the 700 block of Sampson Street, the encroachment under certain terms and conditions. The proposed encroachments include 3 decorated gateway signs, including one to be eliminated, 31 planters, and a proposed pedestal, overhead lighting, and banner poles encompassing the area along the west curb line of South 7th Street, along the north and south curb line of Sampson Street, and along the east curb line of South 8th Street. Department of Streets is not opposed to these proposed encroachments, as the required minimum clear unobstructed footway for each encroachment will be maintained. This concludes my testimony. I'm pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Marconi. Ms. Chu, please proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairmember Young and members of Committee on Streets and Services. I'm Sarah Chu, City Planner with the Philadelphia City Planning Commission. I'm here to testify on Bill Number 240250, which was introduced by Councilmember Squilla on April 4th, 2024. This bill will allow various encroachments on the 700 blocks of Sansom Street. This includes multiple signs, a pedestal, support on the sidewalk, and planters within the parking lane. A minimum of 6 feet of clear sidewalk space is to remain after the installation. The city's Art Commission has approved these proposed signs. The City Planning Commission at its meeting on April 18th, 2024 recommended a bill number 240250 for approval. I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for these witnesses on this bill? Are there, seeing none, are there any other witnesses, is there any other public testimony from the audience? Seeing none, Mr. Pullen, would you please read the name of the title of the next bill?
Bill number 240243, titled Authorizing an Encroachment in the Nature of a Staircase in the Vicinity of 1951 East Monmouth Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19134, under certain terms and conditions.
Hold on, Mr. Pullen, I'm sorry, there are a couple there are someone looking to testify on bill number 240250.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Levy from the Center City District. I'm joined by Rich Goldberg, who's the president of the Jewelers Row Association. I will be very brief because you've heard from the Streets Department already. I have copies of my testimony with images if you would like, but just here to testify in favor of this bill. We went through an extensive planning process starting back in 2019 in partnership with Jewelers Row, which we considered many different alternatives. We secured a $500,000 RCAP grant for this project. The CCD committed $1.5 million, and we've installed virtually all of these improvements. We learned after the installation that we required a encroachment ordinance, which is why we are here today. We took this in front of the Art Commission. You will see attached to my testimony the approval from the Art Commission itself. The key part of this is to increase the visibility of Jewelers Row for people in Independence Hall. We can see we've done on page 2 additional lighting. We put new lighting strips, LED strips on the light poles that you can see on the picture on page 2, planters, banners, so people at Independence Hall discover that there is a Jewelers Row. The last piece, which we really have not yet done, which we do definitely require your approval for, is on the second part, bottom of the second page, is a gateway arch sign that's visible in both directions that says Jewelers Row. So we're really pleased to have worked in partnership with Jewelers Row, and I'd like just Jeff to jump in.
Rich Goldberg here. So I'm third-generation owner at Safety and Rudolph Jewelers and president of the Jewelers Row District. Being around this my whole life, I've seen my grandfather's generation where Jewelers Row was the only place to go, and it's struggled over a number of years to really draw the crowds and the Philadelphia population. And thanks to Paul's help, we've come up with this plan that has really improved the visibility and attractiveness of Jewelers Row. And our main goal is to really make this a destination again, 1 block from Independence Hall, and to be able to draw in the next generation. So having these new planters, these lights, and hopefully soon the gateway sign will really help to redefine our district and help over 100 businesses within our few blocks. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for these witnesses? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony.
I just want to thank Councilman Squilla for his leadership to introduce this. Thank you very much. Appreciate your support.
Thank you. Are there any other witnesses, any other public testimony on bill number 240250? Seeing none, Mr. Pullen, please call the title of the next bill.
Bill number 240243, titled Authorizing an Encroachment in the Nature of a Staircase in the Vicinity of 1951 East Monmouth Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania 19134, under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Pullen. Please call the next witnesses.
The next witnesses to testify are Noel Marconi, Legislative Affairs Director for the Department of Streets, and Sarah Chu, Development Director for the City Planning Commission.
Again, good afternoon. Please state your name and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Young and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noel Marconi, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill number 240243, introduced by Councilmember Lozada. This bill authorizes M&R Holdings PA3 LLC, or the owner's designee, the owner, to install, own, and maintain encroachments in the nature of a staircase at 1951 East Monmouth Street, all under certain terms and conditions. One proposed staircase will be located adjacent to the building of 1951 East Monmouth Street and will encroach a distance of approximately 3 feet 7 inches towards the south along the north footway of Emerald Street. The Department of Streets is not opposed to this proposed staircase as it will maintain an unobstructed footway of 7 feet 11 inches. This concludes my testimony, and please answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Ms. Chu, please proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairmember Young and members of Committee on Streets and Services. I'm Sarah Chu, City Planner with the Philadelphia City Planning Commission. I'm here to testify on bill number 240243, which was introduced by Councilmember Lozada on April 4th, 2024. This bill will allow a staircase at 1951 East Monmouth Street. A minimum of 7 feet 11 inches of clear sidewalk space is to remain after the installation. The proposed encroachment meets the complete street policy. The Planning Commission at its meeting on April 18, 2024 recommended bill number 240243 for approval. I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee for these witnesses? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony on this bill. Are there anyone else in this chamber here to testify on bill number 240243? Seeing none, thank you. Mr. Pullen, please read the title of the next bill.
Bill number 240301, titled Authorizing Encroachments in the Nature of a Sidewalk Cafe in the Vicinity of 6516 Castor Avenue, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania 19149, under certain terms and conditions.
Mr. Pullen, please call the next witnesses.
The next witnesses to testify are Noel Marconi, Legislative Affairs Director for the Department of Streets, and Sarah Chu, Development Director for the City Planning Commission.
Please proceed with the testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Young and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noel Marconi, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here today to offer testimony on bill number 240301, introduced by Councilmember Phillips. This bill authorizes Warren Matz and Marlene Matz, the owners, to install, own, and maintain encroachments in the nature of a sidewalk cafe at On Charcoal, located at 6516 Castor Avenue, all under certain terms and conditions. A total of 2 tables and 8 seats for a sidewalk cafe will be located along the north sidewalk of Castor Avenue along the property line of 6516 Castor Avenue. The Department of Streets is not opposed to this proposed sidewalk cafe as it will maintain 10 feet of unobstructed footway. This concludes my testimony, and please answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Ms. Chu, please proceed with your testimony.
Chairmember Young and members of Committee on Street Services. I'm Sarah Chu, City Planner with the Philadelphia City Planning Commission. I'm here to testify on bill number 240301, which was introduced by Councilmember Phillips on April 18, 2024. This bill will allow a sidewalk cafe encroachment on 6516 Castor Avenue. A minimum of 10 feet of clear sidewalk space is to remain after the installation. The encroachment meets the city's complete street policy. The Planning Commission is scheduled to consider this bill at its meeting on May 16, 2024, with a staff recommendation for approval. I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. Are there any questions of these witnesses by members of this committee? I do have one question. So they're only asking for 2 tables essentially, and we make the, I guess, business owners go through this process, the legislative process for, even if they wanted 1 table outside, they still have to go through this encroachment process? I mean, I just think that's a little, yeah, we got to figure that out, because I just think that we should make it a little bit easier for a mom and pop business to allow, to just set up a table and a chair outside their business so their customers can just sit and enjoy a cup of coffee, a donut, or something. We got to make it a little bit easier than having to go through the legislative process, which can take months and months. So that would be something that I hope that members of this committee can support as we look forward to, change some of these regulations and rules. But I thank you for your testimony on this bill. Is there any other members, any other folks in the chamber looking to testify on bill number 240301? Seeing none, Mr. Pullen, can you please call the title of the next bill?
Bill number 240239, titled Authorizing Encroachments in the Nature of a Sidewalk Cafe in the Vicinity of 2201 Christian Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania 19146, property under certain terms and conditions.
Mr. Pullen, please call the name of the next witnesses to testify on this bill.
The next witnesses to testify are Noel Marconi, Legislative Affairs Director for the Department of Streets, and Sarah Chu, Development Director for the City Planning Commission.
Ms. Marconi, please proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Young and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noel Marconi, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here today to offer testimony on bill number 240239, introduced by Councilmember Gilmore Richardson on behalf of Council President Johnson. This bill authorizes AKR Properties to install, own, and maintain encroachments in the nature of a sidewalk cafe at the Sidecar Cafe located at 2201 Christian Street, all under certain terms and conditions. A total of 7 tables and 20 seats for a sidewalk cafe will be located along the west sidewalk of South 22nd Street, along the curb line and property line of 2201 Christian Street, and the north sidewalk of Christian Street along the property line of 2201 Christian Street. Department of Streets is not opposed to this proposed sidewalk cafe, as it will maintain the minimum of 7 feet unobstructed footway along 22nd Street and a minimum of 9 feet 6 inches along Christian Street. This concludes my testimony, and please answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Marconi. Ms. Chu, please proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairmember Young and members of Committee on Streets and Services. I'm Sarah Chu, a city planner with the Philadelphia City Planning Commission. I'm here to testify on bill number 240239, which was introduced by Councilmember Gilmore Richardson for Council President Johnson on April 4th, 2024. This bill will allow a sidewalk cafe at 2201 Christian Street. A minimum of 7 feet of clear sidewalk spaces to remain after the installation. The proposed encroachment is within the furnishing zone and meets the complete streets policy. The City Planning Commission at its meeting on April 18, 2024 recommended a bill number 240239 for approval. I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions of these witnesses on bill number 240239? Seeing none, is there anyone in the chambers looking to testify on bill number 240239? Yes, come up, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Richard Gleniak. Good afternoon, Chair Young and members of the committee. I'm actually I'm here in support of this passage of this sidewalk cafe. I'm also a Democratic committee person and also on the Neighborhood Association board, and I'm sure if the board had time to consider this at their regular meeting, they would be in support of this as well. The Sidecar Cafe has always been a good neighbor ever since they opened up many years ago, and we definitely, and I support the passage of this bill and this sidewalk cafe.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions of this witness by members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for taking time out to come down here, sir.
Thank you so much.
Is there anyone else in the chamber looking to testify on bill number 240239? Seeing none, Mr. Pullen, please please read the title of the next bill.
Bill number 240119, titled Authorizing Encroachments in the Nature of 2 New Light Poles and 3 Existing Light Poles in the vicinity of southeast and northwest corners of John F. Kennedy Boulevard and North Broad Streets, and the northeast corner of John F. Kennedy Boulevard and North Juniper Street, all under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you. Please read the name of the next witnesses.
The next witnesses to testify are Noel Marconi, Legislative Affairs Director for the Department of Streets, and Sarah Chu, Development Director for the City Planning Commission.
Thank you. Ms. Marconi, please proceed with the testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Young and members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Noel Marconi, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Streets. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill number 240119, introduced by Councilmember Young. This bill authorizes trustees of title to the Masonic Temple and other real estate of the Grand Lodge, the owner, to install, own, and maintain encroachments in the nature of light poles located on the southeast and northwest corners of JFK Boulevard and North Broad Street, and in the vicinity of the northeast corner of JFK Boulevard and North Juniper Street, their property, all under certain terms and conditions. 2 new light poles will be installed to illuminate the facade of the Masonic Library and the Museum Temple located at 33 North Broad Street, aka 1 North Broad Street. The new light poles will be located at the northwest and southeast corners of JFK Boulevard and North Broad Street. 2 existing poles will be refit with new lighting fixtures to illuminate the facade of the temple. 1 other existing pole will remain and will have no lighting fixtures installed. The Department of Streets is not opposed to this proposed encroachment, as the passable sidewalk space will remain as existing. This concludes my testimony, and please answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Marconi. Ms. Chu, please proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairmember Young and members of Committee on the Streets and Services. I'm Sarah Chu, City Planner with the Philadelphia City Planning Commission. I'm here to testify on Bill number 240119, which was introduced by Councilmember Young on February 29, 2024. This bill will allow new light poles and 3 existing light poles in the furnishing zone in the vicinity of southeast and northwest corners of JFK Boulevard and North Broad Streets, and northeast corner of JFK Boulevard and Juniper Street. The proposed encroachment is within the furnishing zone and meets the city's complete streets policy. The City Planning Commission, at its meeting on March 21st, 2024, recommended Bill number 240119 for approval. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have now.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions for these witnesses on bill number 240119? Seeing none, is there anyone else in the chambers wishing to testify on bill number 240119? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony. Mr. Pullen, would you please read the title of the next bill?
Bill number 240331, titled Amending Section 9-215 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Streeteries, modifying requirements related to the city's revised standards and requirements associated with the use of portions of the right-of-way for outdoor dining.
Thank you. Before we call the witnesses, the chair recognizes Councilmember Landau.
Sorry. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me in the Streets Committee, and thanks for giving me a second. Just wanted to say a couple of remarks. You might remember that a few weeks ago we held a hearing on outdoor dining in Philadelphia. And as a result of that hearing, I introduced a bill which will be heard by the Streets Committee today. This bill modifies this section of the Philadelphia Code for streeteries. As a city renowned for its culinary diversity and innovation, Philadelphia's outdoor dining scene can be an awesome addition that benefits residents and visitors alike. I also know that outdoor dining can be safer and more accessible for many people who may be immunocompromised and want to eat safely outside, or who use a wheelchair and can more easily access a dining table at the ground level. We commend the prior administration and council for creating a dining program in early 2023 to allow for a process for restaurants and cafes to apply for a streetery license, allowing a restaurant to use the street space in front of their building for outdoor dining, which is what the license does. However, we've heard from restaurants all over the city that the onerous process and sometimes restrictive regulations can leave business owners feeling lost at sea. My team and I are looking at every angle on this issue, and I look forward to working with the administration and my colleagues over the next few weeks and months to help improve these processes and support restaurants who are looking to expand dining options outside. The ordinance you're considering today is a small measure that will have big impacts for our small businesses in Philadelphia. Currently, restaurants are entitled only to take up the street space closest to the curb, known as the right-of-way, for the street in front of their building. Under the proposed amendment, restaurants will have the option of expanding into the right-of-way abutting the adjacent property to that restaurant, meaning both the space in front of their building and expanding into the space in front of the building next door. If adopted, expanded streeteries in front of an adjacent property would be allowable with the permission of the next door property owner. The expansion would be subject to regulations developed by the administration, like the current streetery licenses. I'm committed to working with the administration to make sure those are implemented in a way that's streamlined and user accessible, so restaurants can get up and running with their expanded streeteries as soon as possible with the weather getting warmer. We're going to hear today from restaurants, especially very small restaurants, who would greatly benefit from expanded space to serve customers and grow our economy. We'll hear from BIDS and the diverse chambers who are supportive of this bill as well. This legislation recognizes the importance of outdoor dining spaces in Philadelphia's cultural landscape. Thank you to my colleagues for considering this legislation and reaffirming our commitment to creating and supporting a thriving hospitality industry, safe and vibrant city streets in all our neighborhoods, while safeguarding the interests of our residents and entrepreneurs. Thank you very much, Chair.
You're welcome, Councilmember Landau. Mr. Pullen, would you please call the first witness to testify on bill number 240331?
First witness to testify on 240331 is Karen Fegley, Deputy Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for the Department of Commerce.
Good afternoon, Ms. Fegley. Could you please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony?
Yes, good afternoon, Chairperson Young, members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Karen Fegley, Deputy Commerce Director. I'm here to offer testimony on bill number 240331, introduced by Councilmember Landau. The proposed amendments intend to make streeteries more user-friendly for our restaurant community, as the Councilmember has explained. And we appreciate and support the amendment's allowance for the administration to require, add requirements by regulations, such as indemnification against legal claims and written permission by the adjacent property owners. As we state in our Streetery Guide, Philadelphia's thriving restaurant scene has helped our city become an international destination. I know you all know this. Many of our restaurants are locally owned and reflect the people, places, and global flavors of our population. Restaurants create jobs, enhance the economy, and create a sense of community in neighborhoods all over Philadelphia. Outdoor dining has been a mainstay of Philadelphia's dining culture for decades, from sidewalk awnings of cheesesteak shops and water ice stands to the cafe tables and shade umbrellas of upscale restaurants. Utilizing the public right-of-way for private dining is a privilege for restaurants as an enhancement to their seating capacity. The administration recognizes that our existing outdoor dining program has challenges. While many restaurants have been happy to fully return to indoor service when they were allowed to after the pandemic, at a point in the pandemic, we know that others would like to provide outdoor options, and they're frustrated by the rules or the licensing process. We have far fewer streeteries than anticipated. That's a fact. That said, I want to go on record and correct some information that we shared during the pandemic. It was previously stated and often repeated that Philadelphia issued 800 temporary licenses for streeteries. And that number's just been thrown around. But at the time, there were actually far fewer actual streeteries. For expediency, the city utilized an existing license called the Temporary Sidewalk Cafe license to respond to the emergency. And the things permitted under that license included streeteries, as well as temporary parking lot dining, temporary loading zones for takeout restaurants, even temporary outdoor operations for childcares and gyms. As we reconciled the data, there were also numerous duplicate requests that had been counted. And so I just want to state that I believe there were about 250 streeteries operating at their height, and a citywide visual survey by our Streets Department found 134 streeteries in January 2023. So also for the record, Philadelphia was among the first cities to enact a permanent streetery program. And we did that, we put that in place, and we prided ourselves on getting that done because we wanted to make it clear that we want these amenities to remain. Yet sometimes being first means we have to circle back and make some corrections. And thus we really appreciate Council Members Landau and Young for prioritizing revisions and supporting our restaurant community. So I would like to share some of the program revisions that Commerce and the administration are prioritizing, in addition to, outside of this legislation. In line with the PHL Open for Business initiative, we're always seeking ways to streamline the application and approval processes for businesses, make it easier to do business in Philadelphia. We hope to have some changes soon to reduce steps where we can. And additionally, any restaurant interested in pursuing outdoor dining can contact the Mayor's Business Action Team in the Commerce Department. Our business navigators are going to now stay with that restaurant every step of the way, joining them in the meeting with the Streets Department engineers and ensuring that issues are resolved along the way to accelerate approval times. Many businesses don't realize that there are 3 streetery options when we're talking about this, right? There are what we call structures, what we call platforms, and what we call pavement streeteries. The latter 2 are really easy versions and do not require building permits or art commission review. So if designs don't have an overhead covering or walls, they can have their permits in 20 days. And to encourage those easy versions, we are also going to engage design experts to design a standard streetery model. Restaurants would not be required to use that model, but it would greatly accelerate the approval process. We continue to speak with other cities, watch how their programs are working so that we can consider the best tools for Philadelphia. It's tricky to balance the vibrancy, amenities, and revenues that come from outdoor dining with the very real responsibilities to near neighbors, to safety, accessibility, and our maintenance of the right-of-way. So I'm trying to abridge my testimony because I know it's a long hearing. So I've submitted in writing some more options, things that we think could help accomplish that balance, expanding by right areas, making all streeteries open air and seasonal, and again, anyone in the administration is happy to discuss this with any of you. I just want to reiterate my appreciation to City Council for supporting the business community, for facilitating the ease of doing business, and acknowledge the multiple city departments, law, planning, health, L&I, fire, and especially streets that have contributed to the creation and ongoing administration of Philadelphia's outdoor dining program. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fegley. Are there any questions of this witness by members of this committee?
Yeah, I have one.
Chair recognizes Council Member Ahmad.
Croaky voice. I have a question about the permission from the adjacent property owner. Is that grandfathered if they sell their property? Meaning, if property ownership changes on the
No,
adjacent?
we have to write exactly how this is going to work, but our expectation would be that it would be something that would have to be renewed every year, or if there was a property ownership change.
Okay, so you'd have to take permission again?
Yes.
Okay, just one
Thank you.
We've also considered, we'll consider adding a requirement to have the permission of like the first floor tenant of the adjacent property, knowing that sometimes there are out-of-town landlords who may agree, but and the tenants change and that sort of thing. So that's something we still have to work out.
Thank you, Council Member Landau.
Just want to thank you again for working with us so much, and also, most importantly, for having your business navigators with your Mayor's Business Action Team being the one-stop shop for the restaurants to go to help navigate this whole process. The way you're streamlining this is fantastic, and I know the restaurants, I've talked to so many of them, they already appreciate it.
That's great. Thank you for putting that idea in our ear during our budget hearing.
And I just want to make a comment or question. Is that something that could be done with other industries as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm getting ahead of myself a little, but we did announce, the mayor renamed our Office of Business Services as Mayor's Business Action Team. So they continue, as they have always been, available to any business to help, to call by phone or email. We have a hotline. We're going to have within that team And the official announcement's coming in a few days, but business navigators, who are going to be like a specialized unit within that team that are really going to do the problem solving. So whereas our regular business service managers are out there in the neighborhoods every day, educating businesses, answering questions, we're going to have a few folks that are specialists and are assigned to work with, there's going to be people dedicated from every other city department too to work with them and just really make sure we're resolving those issues every step of the way. I'm
Great.
sure we'll learn a lot while we're doing it.
I think that would be very helpful for our small business community here, particularly when it comes to like small restaurants or daycares trying to navigate the zoning process or other regulatory processes. I mean, to have someone from the city walk them through each step of the way could save them a lot of time and money, essentially. So I want to thank the mayor's administration for putting that idea forward and helping our small businesses. Are there any other questions of this witness by members of the committee? Thank you so much, Ms. Becker, for your testimony. Mr. Pullen, could you please call the names of the next witnesses to testify on bill number 240331?
The next witnesses to testify are Job Itzkowitz, Executive Director of Old City District, Ben Feliccia, Senior Vice President of Strategy and Engagement at the Pennsylvania Restaurant and Lodging Association, Spoonie O'Neill, owner of O'Neill's Tavern, and Ashley Thomas, owner of the Royal Restaurant Group.
Thank you so much. Please state your name for the record and begin with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chair Young and all members of the Committee on Streets and Services. My name is Job Itzkowitz, and I'm the Executive Director of the Old City Special Services District. I'm here to testify in support of Bill number 240331, related to use of portions of the right-of-way for outdoor dining. I also want to thank Councilmember Landau and the whole body for their continued work on outdoor dining, as this is an issue that not only affects Philadelphia's economy in terms of job creation and tax revenue, but at its core speaks to the kind of city that we want to live in. Though I was not able to attend last month's hearing about streeteries in general, maybe that's for the best because I submitted lengthy written testimony, I will not try to be overly repetitive here today. By way of background, the Old City Special Services District operates as a municipal authority and business improvement district in the Old City neighborhood. Now in its 27th year, Old City District continues to support the dynamic Old City neighborhood. OCD serves to supplement, but not replace, both the services provided by the City of Philadelphia and the responsibilities of property owners, contributing to a healthy environment for businesses to be successful, for visitors to enjoy their experience there, and for residents to maintain a positive quality of life. Perhaps more than many issues, the successful outdoor dining program serves all three of these ends. In the spring of 2020, OCD helped form the Philadelphia Bid Alliance. The Bid Alliance came together in large part because Philadelphia's bids realized they needed to start planning and advocating for outdoor dining as pandemic restrictions ended. At that time, the Bid Alliance developed a 4-point policy proposal that would address the needs of the restaurants on our commercial corridors, but would also have broader applicability to the diverse restaurants across the city. Those points were sidewalk seating by right, something that Chair Young just alluded to during a previous bill, sidewalk seating at an adjacent property by right with property owner's permission, use of the parking lane in front of the business for seating by right, and use of the parking lane in front of an adjacent property for seating by right with property's owner's permission. And so what we were advocating for in 2020, I'm here wearing my OCD hat, we're still advocating for today. In anticipation of the expiration of the emergency legislation that Council passed in 2020, in 2021, City Council passed legislation to establish streeteries, allowing for outdoor dining in portions of the public right-of-way. This legislation marked a significant step towards promoting public safety, accessibility, and economic vitality. The subsequent launch of the permanent outdoor dining program in January 2023, facilitated by that legislation, aimed to regulate streeteries and sidewalk cafes while prioritizing public safety and accessibility. However, data reveals that only a handful of restaurants renewed their streetery licenses for 2024. That's true in Old City as it is elsewhere. At its peak, Old City had about a dozen streeteries, maybe more. Today it has one, and that one just opened in the last few weeks. There's several reasons why streeteries have not opened at the same rate as during the pandemic, but I want to focus on one issue relevant to the issue in today's hearing. It's geometry. In Old City, as in many Philadelphia neighborhoods and commercial corridors, our storefronts are no more than 20 feet wide. So if you think about like your row house, I live in a row house that's 16 feet wide. Sometimes the commercial corridor is a little bit wider, but we're not looking at 50 feet of width for most of these restaurants. Under the regulations, the current regulations, accounting for ADA accessibility, crash-proof barriers, avoiding fire hydrants, and other requirements, there's really limited space for seating. That limitation creates an economic barrier for streetery creation. A restaurant may not obtain a sufficient return on investment to justify the significant investment required to build the streetery. Offering those restaurants more opportunities to utilize the street in front of neighboring properties offsets that barrier. Customer seating increases significantly, but costs do not. In anticipation of the 2023 municipal elections, the BID Alliance put forth its 2023 policy agenda, which included the following policy plank on outdoor dining. Legalize outdoor dining on every commercial corridor. Outdoor dining is a lifeline for restaurants and is enjoyed by their customers. The city should enact policies to make outdoor dining as easy as possible for restaurants and cafes. The city should allow cafe seating by right on all commercial corridors and cafe seating at the neighboring properties with owner permission. The city should also include streeteries by right in all commercial corridors and allow neighboring parking spaces with permission. Permanent, by right, outdoor dining will create economic opportunities for the city, such as the ability to collect additional revenue through tax revenue from employment and sales, application fees, renewals, and compliance. It will also continue to benefit restaurants throughout the city. This body determined that streeteries are a public good when it legalized them on a permanent basis in 2021. However, the economics of the regulations that followed that legislation resulted in fewer streeteries than advocates, and certainly restaurants had hoped.
Mr. Igovitz, hold on, please. Chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla.
Is this your brief version?
Yes. You remember reading the one. I'm on the last paragraph, Councilman.
All right.
And the next line was, I applaud this body.
All right,
I applaud this body for taking the next logical step in shaping legislation that will benefit Philadelphia by supporting the successful creation of more streeteries. Thank you for allowing me to testify this afternoon, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Fletcher, please proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, Chairperson Young, Vice Chairperson Squilla, and esteemed council members. My name is Ben Fletcher, Senior Vice President of Strategy and Engagement at the Pennsylvania Restaurant and Lodging Association. It's a pleasure to be with you again, and especially so soon. PRLA represents over 400 operators in Philadelphia and more than 5,000 members statewide. Before I start, I just want to give a shout out to Karen Fegley and Justine Bokus from Commerce. They have been such a tremendous support to the hospitality industry over the past few years, at times giving white glove service to the restaurants, and honestly, we could not have done it without those two, and I really just want to make note of that, because they are such tremendous examples of what a city can do, and I applaud their efforts, and I just want to make sure they are recognized for that. Today is the association representing restaurants, hotels, and the broader tourism industry in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. We're here to offer our support for Councilmember Landau's Bill number 240331, which expands options for streeteries by allowing streeteries in Philadelphia to explore the use of space adjacent to their operating restaurants. Last time we gathered, industry members and I stressed the urgency of this conversation. We're grateful to see that urgency echoed by you all. Special thanks to Councilmember Rue Landau for leading the charge and bringing this issue to the forefront. While we've discussed numerous improvements to outdoor dining programs today, we want to underscore the importance of adjacent use and the flexibility it offers to hospitality operators here in Philadelphia. Allowing adjacent use will inject vitality into the industry, benefiting operators, employees, and visitors alike. It means more seating, translating to increased opportunities for restaurant operators and more jobs for staff. Many operators have expressed interest in establishing streeteries, but have been hindered by limited abutting space, rendering it economically unfeasible. Councilmember Landau's legislation presents a practical solution to this challenge, and one that is based off of feedback from the impacted industry. Advancing this legislation will enhance the accessibility for visitors and consumers. Outdoor dining often provides a more spacious, accessible, and convenient experience compared to indoor seating, especially in older or historic establishments with tight and cramped interiors. To illustrate the significance of adjacent use, let me share a couple stories from our members. A great operator on 15th Street, Good Dog Bar, had a beautiful streetery using the adjacent bank property. This allowed them to hire additional staff and serve more of our community. They went from having 48 additional seats to now 8 additional seats. They look forward to expanding their streetery again and hiring more staff in the coming months. Mike's Barbecue, a nationally renowned, locally owned corner barbecue restaurant on 11th and Morris, had previously been allowed to have a couple of picnic benches in front of their restaurant. Unfortunately, since they are a corner property, they were forced to remove them. With the passing of this bill, Mike's will be able to once again serve guests al fresco in front of their neighbor's property with permission. Owners and operators have tirelessly advocated for city government to enable the use of adjacent property in the streetery program, especially those in unique locations like corner properties and historic neighborhoods. Today, this committee has the opportunity to address the presenting need. PRLA proudly supports Councilmember Landau's efforts to advance this legislation on adjacent use, and we stand ready to assist the city as we collectively move forward. We look forward to working with the administration and council in any way we can as regulations are drafted and considered, and we're happy to help in any way to ensure that the industry is engaged along the way. We also look forward to hearing directly from some of our owners and operators at the meeting today who can attest to how this legislation will positively impact their business. Thank you, Councilwoman Landau, this committee, and all of council for your leadership in this important initiative.
Thank you so much. Will Ms. Thomas and Mr. O'Neill please present your testimony?
Ms. Thomas first. Good morning. Good afternoon, Chairperson Young, Vice Chairperson Squilla, and fellow council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today. My name is Ashley Thomas. I'm the Director of HR, Licensing, and Compliance for the Royal Restaurant Group. We have no approved streeteries yet. I've applied for 4, but we do have sidewalk cafes at Triangle Tavern, Dos Segundos, and Cantina Los Caballitos. We want to add them to Khyber Pass Pub in Old City and Blazer's Food Joint on South Street, because nobody wants to sit inside a hermetically sealed box on a 70-degree day. I appreciate the invitation and opportunity to share some of my thoughts and feedback on Councilmember Landau's legislation to authorize the use of adjacent property as it relates to Philadelphia's streetery program, Bill number 240331. I am also happy to answer any questions or address any concerns you all may have. We have one bar that is 17 feet wide, and in front of it is a Bilko door, one of those death basement trapdoors. So this leaves us room for exactly one teeny tiny bistro table with 2 seats. Our neighbors do not mind at all if we put tables in front of their place, and we did at the beginning of the pandemic. A streetery would let us have 3 tables outside, and using the adjacent area would allow us to have 5 tables outside. Any one of us could now take both parents with us to lunch, because right now we can't with 2 seats. I would really love to make this a possibility. Like Ben noted in his testimony, allowing for adjacent use will help inject vitality into the industry, make the streets safer with constant outside presence, and make it cleaner as well. This in turn will benefit operators, employees, and visitors. Owners and operators have tirelessly advocated for city government to enable the use of adjacent property, especially those in unique locations like corner properties and our teeny tiny historic neighborhood. Today, we hope the committee will take the opportunity to act on this need. Thank you, Councilmember Landau, and big thanks to the entire committee for inviting us to participate. We look forward to helping however we can moving forward. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Mr. O'Neill, please proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Greg Rand, R-A-N-D. Good afternoon, Chairperson Young, Vice Chairperson Squilla. It's always a pleasure to see you again. And fellow council members, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today. As I stated, my name is Greg Rand, but everybody knows me by Spoonie. I am the owner-operator of O'Neill's Pub off of South Street on 3rd in the South Street Head House Business District. We currently operate a small legal streetery in front of our establishment and would love to have an addition to our streetery at the adjoining property. I appreciate the invitation and opportunity to share some of my thoughts and feedback on Council Members Landau's legislation to authorize the use of adjacent property as it relates to the Philadelphia Streetery Program, Bill number 240331. I'm also happy to answer any questions or address any concerns you all may have. Let me first say, O'Neill's Pub is coming up on 45 years of business, and I myself have been working in the Head House District for 38 years. During the terrible time of COVID, we had a streetery at 2 adjoining properties, including in front of another restaurant, which saved us. Our neighbors and our fellow businesses enjoyed that streetery, and I'm here to ask you to please consider being in favor of this bill, not just for us, but the restaurant industry as a whole. It would open so many more doors. Councilmember Landau's legislation makes sense. It's practical for the city, will enhance the outdoor dining programs in Philadelphia, and will allow restaurants to expand operations and create new opportunities. Like Ben noted in his testimony, allowing for adjacent use will help inject vitality into the industry. That in turn will benefit operators, employees, and visitors. Owners and operators have tirelessly advocated for the city government to enable to use the adjacent property, especially those in unique locations like corner properties and historic neighborhoods. Today, we hope the committee will take the opportunity to act in this need. Thank you, Councilmember Landau, and a big thanks to the entire committee for inviting us to participate today. We look forward to helping however we can moving forward. Happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions of these witnesses by members of the committee? Nope. Seeing none, we really appreciate your time to come down here and testify on this bill. Is there anyone else in the chamber here to testify on bill number 240331?
I have a Richard Galinick.
Mr. Chair, too, I just want to thank everybody who came out and testified. Thank you for taking the time and effort of the business owners to come out here and share their interest in how important this bill is to them. So it's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Yes. Chair recognizes Council Member Landau.
I just wanted to put one thing on the record for the last panel is that, I already shared with the owner of O'Neill's that when we talk about the vitality that comes to city streets, we also talk about safety. I'm often walking past his place where I've never met him before today, but that there's people outside because he's always had seats outside, and it actually just makes the streets safer and more vibrant. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Council Member. Please proceed to your testimony. Yes.
Good afternoon again. Chair Young and committee, members of the Streets and Services Committee. My name is Richard Gliniak. As I said before, I'm a Democratic committee person. I'm also a member of the South of South Neighborhood Association there in the Graduate Hospital area. And I don't have a lot to say, but I do want to say as a frequent restaurant patron, I strongly support streeteries, sidewalk cafes, and parklets, and I strongly support this common sense bill number 240331. It is about walkability, and this would definitely enhance the walkability. We are very fortunate to be in one of the most walkable cities in the nation, in my view, and this would go a long way. It is shocking to me that they were not already allowed to open up at the adjacent properties with that owner's permission, of course. This is a common sense bill, and I strongly support it. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions of this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Is there anyone else in the chamber wishing to testify on bill number 240331? Seeing none, thank you. Mr. Pullen, would you please read the titles of the next bills to be heard?
Bill number 240183, titled Establishing Parking Regulations in the Vicinity of Hoffman Street between South 19th Street and South 20th Street, Pierce Street between South 17th and South 18th Street, Pierce Street between South 21st Street and South 20th Street, Siegel Street between South 22nd Street and South 23rd Street, McClellan Street between South 18th Street and South 17th Street, McClellan Street between South 19th Street and South 18th Street, McClellan Street between South 20th Street and South 19th Street, Jackson Street between South 15th Street and South 16th Street, Jackson Street between South 19th Street and South 20th Street, McKean Street between South 20th Street and South 21st Street, and also Bill number 240184, titled Establishing Parking Regulations in the Vicinity of South 18th Street between Reed Street and Wharton Street, South 18th Street between Dickinson Street and Reed Street, South 18th Street between Tasker Street and Dickinson Street, Oakford Street between South 24th Street and South 25th Street, Oakford Street between South 22nd Street and South 23rd Street, South 19th Street between Dickinson Street and Tasker Street, South 21st Street between Tasker Street and Morris Street, Manton Street between South 20th Street and South 19th Street, Bancroft Street between Tasker Street and Morris Street, Alter Street between South 22nd Street and South 21st Street, and also Bill number 240191, titled Establishing Parking Regulations in the Vicinity of North Street between Belgrade Street and Gall Street, Ritter Street between Dauphin Street and North Street, York Street between Mercer Street and Thompson Street, Haggard Street between Cedar Street and Gall Street, Wisher Street between Frankfurt Avenue and Elmwood Street, Delancey Street between South 2nd Street and Front Street between Spruce Street and Pine Street, Spruce Street between South 2nd Street and South 3rd Street, and also Bill number 240334, titled Amending Chapter 12-2700 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Permit Parking Districts by changing certain boundaries and establishing new permit parking districts, all under certain terms and conditions, and also Bill number 240335, titled Amending Chapter 12-2700 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Permit Parking Districts by extending the authorized duration of temporary parking permits and setting new permit application fees, all under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Pullen. Would you please call the witnesses to testify on these bills?
The first witness to testify is Lester Emerson, Deputy Manager of the Philadelphia Parking Authority.
Good afternoon, Mr. Emerson. Please state your name for the record and begin your testimony on the bills.
Good day, Council. Chairman. My name is Lester Emerson, Deputy Manager for the Philadelphia Parking Authority. Thank you for allowing me to testify before Council regarding bills 240183, 240184, and 240191, establishing parking regulations. The Philadelphia Parking Authority has no objection to the ordinances previously read before Council and recommends favorable consideration. Should I go by the other ones as well? Okay. Once again, thank you for allowing me to testify before Council regarding Ordinance 240334, amending Parking Permit District 40 to allow additional streets to participate in the residential parking program, and Ordinance 240335, amending temporary parking permits. This amendment will increase the amount of days residents can apply and will increase the fee. The Philadelphia Parking Authority has no objection to the ordinances previously read before Council and recommends favorable consideration. Thank you again for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions by members of the committee on these bills? Seeing none, is there any member, any other person in the chambers looking to testify on bill number 240183 or 240184, 240191, 240334, or 240335? Yeah, Mr. Emerson, thank you for your testimony. No questions for you. Mr. Pullen, would you please call the witnesses for 240335?
The next witnesses to testify are Derek Lombardi, Senior Planner at the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, and Michael Fishman, Associate Professor of Practice in the Department of City and Regional Planning at the University of Pennsylvania's Weitzman School of Design.
Yeah, so 335, not a bunch of them. Yeah, 335, yes. Thank you. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon. I'm Derek Lombardi, Senior Planner at the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. I'm Michael Fitchman. I'm an Associate Professor of Practice at the University of Pennsylvania School.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Young, Committee Vice Chair Squilla, and other members of the committee and council. As I mentioned, I'm a planner at the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, also known as DVRPC. We serve as the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Greater Philadelphia region. working with 5 Pennsylvania counties, including the City of Philadelphia, and 4 New Jersey counties. DVRPC manages the region's Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, and its long-range plan, both of which are federally mandated resources to ensure orderly growth and development in the region. And as a member of the Office of Smart Growth, I support the goals and vision identified in that long-range plan by performing analyses and producing planning studies at the request of our members. In 2020 and 2021, our office conducted research on residential parking management strategies at the request of the City of Philadelphia, specifically the Planning Commission. Much of this research focused on residential parking permit programs and what reforms can help the city respond to changing conditions in its neighborhoods. The study, named Spot Check: Strategies for Managing Residential Parking in Philadelphia, was published in 2021. And the purpose of my testimony is to highlight trends and share key takeaways from our research as it relates to Bill number 240335. I should begin by noting that street parking is a key part of our city's transportation system, and it needs active management to ensure it works effectively and adds value to the community. Yet insufficient residential parking was identified as a serious issue in Philadelphia as far back as 1962 and remains a particular challenge here due to the fact that many residential areas were built up before vehicle use was common. Today, as it was then, on-street parking policy is fundamentally an effort to manage demand for an unchanging supply. Population growth and other factors have escalated parking challenges in Philadelphia. The city's first residential parking permit, or RPP, districts were established in 1982, and the program functions much as it always has in spite of these changes. Signs that a given RPP district may be under stress include high occupancy rates, despite the widespread adoption of permit restrictions, long parking search times, and the need to park far from one's destination. Local examples of this have already manifested. A 2013 analysis by RCOs covering Parking District 1 in Southwest Center City suggested that there were nearly 2 parking permits issued for every 1 permit-regulated space. Other recent Planning Commission research found nighttime parking occupancy rates of 107% in Fairmount and 97% in Fishtown. During the course of our study, 3 themes emerged. The first is that demographic, socioeconomic, and development trends have led to a significant increase in the number of cars owned by Philadelphia residents. The parking permit program was established in an era of declining population. Conversely, at the time of our research, the city was experiencing its 13th consecutive year of population growth, while average household size, rates of vehicle ownership, and development activity as measured by building permits also ticked upward. Between 2010 and 2018, zero-car households declined by almost 13,000, despite overall households increasing by nearly 33,000. Furthermore, we estimated that the number of cars in Philadelphia increased at a faster rate than the number of people. The second theme is that parking demand varies across neighborhoods and permit districts and depends on historic development patterns, the distribution and character of new residential development, household size and composition, income, travel needs, and proximity to transit. As such, RPP policies may need to incorporate more flexible standards. In recent years, increases have occurred in both the number of commuters who drove alone to work and in the share of Philadelphians who work outside of the city's boundaries. Moreover, much of Philadelphia's population, housing unit, and income growth has occurred in denser areas where parking challenges were already more acute. The third theme is that attitudes and approaches to parking management have changed since the RPP program was initiated, providing our city with an opportunity to review and amend its policies to reinforce recent transportation and sustainability goals. Where once the parking program was identified as too little supply, it is now increasingly viewed as an inadequate management of existing supply and perhaps even too much supply in some places. Our study examined parking policies in 9 other North American cities, and our report outlines 8 potentially relevant policy changes across 3 categories: permit eligibility, permit cost, and the process of establishing or modifying districts. The proposed amendment considers 3 such changes: a household permit cap, higher permit fees, and a new visitor or temporary permit policy and fees. First, the proposed amendment would establish a cap of 3 permits per household. 5 of the 9 cities we surveyed had implemented some sort of household-based permit cap. Baltimore and Seattle limited all households to 4 permits, while Austin, Texas, and San Francisco enforced different restrictions based on neighborhood context. Portland, Oregon restricted households in some districts to 1 permit per licensed driver and 3 per housing unit. Based on Philadelphia's 2018 permit data, enacting a citywide cap of 3 permits per household would theoretically remove 232 vehicles from permit-restricted streets. Since the vast majority of participating households only obtain 1 or 2 permits, restrictions that reduce eligibility to fewer than 3 permits would have a more dramatic impact. A cap of 2 permits per household would remove another 1,200 additional vehicles. The second provision under consideration is raising the cost to obtain parking permits from $35 for the first permit with a graduated pricing scheme for each additional vehicle to a flat fee of $75 per minute. Pricing reforms are popular, however, setting effective and fair prices can be complex. Here are some ways to think about it. Permit holders typically pay only a fraction of a parking spot's market value. The existing $35 annual fee means that users pay less than $3 per month. By comparison, parking on a metered street costs nearly the same amount for an hour, while the average cost of a reserved monthly parking space is $275, translating to roughly $3,300 a year. The typical disparities in costs for transit or bike share passes also raise equity concerns and incentivize vehicle travel over other modes. Currently, a monthly SEPTA Trans Pass costs $96, over $1,100 in a year, and an annual bike share membership through Indigo is $230, still more than 6 times as expensive as a street parking permit. The average permit cost in the cities we surveyed was $61. Our $35 fee is more expensive than Austin, Baltimore, Boston, and Pittsburgh, but cheaper than Portland, San Francisco, Seattle, and Toronto. At $626, the cost of a second permit in Toronto was more than 3 times greater than the cost of the first permit. Our study advisors suggested that the current fees do not even come close to covering the cost of the program, particularly as the number of permit streets and users have grown. This suggests that raising permit prices in the name of cost recovery and more effective parking management may be feasible. We further commend the bill amendment for offering a fee waiver for the first permitted vehicle in low-income households. The amendment also proposes updated visitor or temporary parking fees with a $7 single-day pass and 15, 30, and 60-day passes that cost $5 per day. In peer cities, visitor parking accommodations varied widely. Some offered annual visitor parking passes to residents ranging in cost from $1 in Pittsburgh to $75 in Portland. Most offered residents daily or other short-term visitor permits, as would continue to be the case here in Philadelphia. Their prices ranged from free in Baltimore and Washington, D.C., to $35 for 1 week in Toronto. Several cities also placed caps on visitor passes. In Austin and San Francisco, the limit was 20 day passes per month, while in Baltimore, the limit was just 4. Toronto limits temporary permits to a maximum of 8 consecutive weeks at a time. To conclude, no single parking management strategy can solve Philadelphia's challenge of too many cars competing for too few curbside spaces. Parking issues are multifaceted and require a comprehensive approach in combination with land use and transportation planning. And instituting any reforms will require trade-offs between efficacy, convenience, ease of administration and enforcement, and importantly, equity. Our report includes several other strategies that could be incorporated into the RPP program and concludes by presenting a series of guiding principles that can help Philadelphia decision makers optimize parking policy. They include establishing clear criteria for how potential changes will be evaluated, engaging stakeholders and the public, differentiating or layering different strategies in different parts of the city, and starting small. DVRPC supports the city's efforts to engage with parking management at this time, and we encourage everyone to review the report online or in the hard copies provided today. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your responses or questions.
Thank you so much. Mr. Fitchman, please, for testimony.
Yes, hello. My name is Michael Fitchman. I'm an associate professor of practice, Department of City and Regional Planning at the University of Pennsylvania. As a matter of disclosure, I'm involved with the city in a couple capacities. I serve on an advisory board to the Commerce Department's Nighttime Economy Director, a member of City Council's Arts and Culture Task Force. I'm not here in either of those capacities, but I just figured I'd mention, and I've always appreciated working with you when it comes to those other issues. I'm here to offer my observations as a researcher and city planner who I'm familiar with transportation behavior and the evaluation of parking programs. And I want to explain why I think curb congestion is occurring and offer some ideas for finding some appropriate goals. My sense is the core issue that we're talking about here is not that the curb is too congested, it's that too many people own cars, and there's not enough place to put them. And so the question we should be asking is, what are our goals? We should be trying to get cars out of the city. What do we need to do to get cars out of the city? Do we need to change prices, or do we need to offer more transit alternatives? My colleague from DVRPC has done fantastic research. I really encourage you to read it. It details a lot of this parking issue, from like soup to nuts, tail to snout. A couple facts that I pulled out of reading that report, that, you know, Philadelphia's population is growing, the number of cars is growing faster than the number of people is growing, but the job market's very regional, so a lot of people have no choice but to drive. So you own a car because it gets you where you need to go, and it gets you where you need to go better than whatever your alternatives are, and you're willing to bear that cost. The costs are not high enough to depress the rates of car ownership, or the alternatives are not good enough. So what happens when we have too many cars? People cruise around looking for parking. They cause street congestion. That can be up to 30% of traffic in cities in some cases. Sometimes cities put in place like mandatory parking requirements, which drive up the cost of land. They induce more driving. They're really bad for the environment. Fortunately, we're getting away from that sort of thing here. Some people respond to congestion by moving. They say, I can't find a place for my car, I'm gonna leave this neighborhood, I'm gonna leave Philadelphia. Those are obviously things we'd like to try to avoid. And some people will switch to taking the bus or the train. And the question is really, what do I do when I need to get somewhere? Does something get me from my door to where I work or where I need to go buy some groceries efficiently? Cost-effectively? People make very complicated calculations, and they vary from household to household depending on how much money you earn, where you need to go, where your job is. So this curb problem is a symptom of auto dependency, and the core issue is the lack of alternatives. Addressing this requires SEPTA services, rideshare, bike infrastructure, car infrastructure, things that give you a good alternative to buying a car or bringing a car to a neighborhood that you want to move to because you have some place of, you know, employment that requires you to drive. So we need to consider where jobs are going. They should be in transit accessible places. So this is a broader question maybe than just pricing. I honestly don't know, based on my research and reading literature, whether small upticks in fees of tens of dollars or even hundreds of dollars are enough to affect the choices of car owners. Are those enough to make you sell your car? Are those enough to dissuade you from moving into a neighborhood with your car? And so we know the market cost to store a car in some neighborhoods can be thousands of dollars, right? That's what parking garage operators are willing to sell you a parking space for in some places. How large a fee is needed for someone to sell their car? I don't know. We don't know how sensitive drivers are to these costs. If the optimal fee is really high, you have to or even if it's just tens or hundreds of dollars, you got to think, what does that do to the household who has no alternative but to drive? That's essentially imposing some sort of fee or a tax on them, and they have no flexibility with their demand to drive. If they have a job in the suburbs, they have to be there. So I suggest the city and its transit partners try to set goals. How many cars should there be in Philadelphia? How congested should the curbs be? You could set goals district to district, and then you can estimate the fees by surveying drivers and doing other kinds of research. What are the fees? What are the transit alternatives that would cause you to move from a car to something else? And that is one car that comes off the road if you can optimize that correctly. So good parking management programs have optimization goals that they strive for with their funding formula or their fees. Lastly, I urge you to dismiss arguments you might hear on parking that market pricing parking is a revenue opportunity for the city. The city is not a parking garage. The government of the city manages public goods. They're trying to manage the curb for access to make people's lives better. If we just wanted to make money from the real estate that's under city control, we'd turn the parks into like steel mills or something, right? The curb is a public good, and we should try to manage it in a way that makes people's lives better. and makes, provides for more equitable outcomes. So my hope is that the city can act, sort of deliberately and holistically and think about how fees and management in coordination with transit partners, using fees to fund transit alternatives, whether these kinds of things are feasible to come up with a long-term solution to the problem. Again, I encourage you to read the research that my colleague provided. I think it's really great, and I'm happy to provide any answers or support on these matters that I can. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions of these witnesses by members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you so much for your I'm sorry. The chair recognizes Council Member Ahmad. Sorry.
Through this, maybe I'm just gonna write it. It's too hard to read. They would have a place to park their car. And those are the automated parking structures that you put one car on top of the other. Just have you thought of different ways?
So Council Member Ahmad's question is essentially, have we thought of different ways to alleviate parking in our community, such as like the layered parking and things like that? And subsidized parking.
Like in the corners of communities, so you can walk to your house, but you still got your car nearby.
Our report does have a number of other strategies. I mentioned the few that relate to the bill language today, but one of the amendments that already went into the legislation a few years ago has a layered strategy, I think in District 38, where a few different rules are in place that do not allow residents of a multifamily building that has its own structured parking in, I think, the River Wards area to receive a district permit pass. And we think that there's room for this type of layering and different strategies. And maybe I didn't quite understand the question as it was telephoned towards me, but in terms of the pricing, I mean, we noted that the discount or the waiver that was offered for the first fee for low-income households, that was something that we've seen done in other cities with different pricing models for different parts of the city as well, not necessarily based on income, but just based on the capacity or the oversubscription for a certain parking district that may warrant charging different rates or just using different policies in the areas of the city where the parking crunch is most severe.
Can I add that the city has the ability to enable dynamic pricing programs. These are really good in places that have some commercial activity, where if you're trying to disentangle parking policy between residents and visitors to the neighborhood, you can tune prices up and down to get the right levels of occupancy. It's a little harder if it's super congested with residential vehicles. This has been done in Pittsburgh, and I've had conversations with people at Otis and other places where this is something that people, have shown some interest in doing in some of the mixed-use areas of the city, and that might be able to drive down some congestion.
Thank you. Are there any questions of these witnesses? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony. Mr. Pullen, will you please call the name of the next witnesses?
The next witnesses to testify are William Tung, Fire Captain for the Philadelphia Fire Department, and Russell Ritchie, Associate Director of Cognitive Science at the University of Pennsylvania.
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman Young, Vice Chair Squilla. I am here on behalf of Fifth Square, definitely not on behalf of my day job. My name is Will Tung. I'm a steering committee member at Fifth Square, and I live in Southwest Philly, in Kingsessing, where I'm the block captain of the 5100 block of Springfield Avenue. I'm testifying in support of Bill 240335, which will bring about small reforms to our residential permit parking system. And I want to push this council body to consider additional changes to more equitably allocate our scarce on-street parking. On my residential block in Kingsessing, at the urging of my older neighbors, I successfully petitioned for permit parking. Before we had RPP, we faced a variety of challenges with parked cars, mostly due to lack of enforcement. Folks with out-of-state plates would leave their cars on our block for months at a time. I had a car abandoned in front of my house for a full year. We had one neighbor that just parked directly in front of the fire hydrant every night. That was his like personal parking spot. All of these problems disappeared once we received RPP and we received consistent enforcement. And to me, solving these quality of life issues is well worth the annual fee of RPP. And stories like these are common, and this is why we at Fifth Square believe that RPP policy is an essential tool to supporting Philadelphia's transportation and quality of life objectives. We believe RPP must also evolve to meet the needs of our changing city. Some of the challenges we see, RPP policy could address, right? There's a disparity in costs between permits and a SEPTA TransPass. If you own a SEPTA TransPass and you pay the monthly cost of a SEPTA TransPass, that's 33 times more expensive than a $35 parking permit. A DVRPC study, Spot Check, which you guys should all have, it showed that between 2010 and 2018, Philadelphia increased more cars than it did people. And we were among the 50 largest cities in the US, we saw the greatest increase in cars, or greatest percentage increase. Also in Permit Zone 1 in Southwest Center City, it found that for every 2 permits issued, there's 1 parking space. There's not enough parking spots for the amount of permits that are being issued. So I urge council to consider using RPP as an essential strategy in reducing parking demand in our most stressed permit districts. So like the crux of our argument is a parking spot in King Sessing or Alany shouldn't cost as much as a parking spot in Center City. And you guys should have also received this book, Paved Paradise by Henry Graber. It's a wonderful book, and it talks about kind of parking science. There's a whole science behind parking, and published last year. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Young, Vice Chair Squilla, and members of City Council. My name is Russell Ritchie. I'm a steering committee member with Fifth Square. I work professionally as a data scientist and cognitive scientist with the University of Pennsylvania, but today I'm just here in my capacity as a member of Fifth Square. So I think the problems that Will described and the previous panelists described, and I think that this bill is largely addressed at solving, we think they can be addressed by recognizing that our streets are public land, and that when someone takes that public land to store a private vehicle, they're excluding the rest of the public from that space. That means that the public should be compensated for the loss of that space according to what the land is actually worth. And there are various methods to figure out what parking land is worth, which previous panelists have described. Dynamic pricing, auctioning off only as many permits as we have spaces, things like that. We can describe, and we should discuss which method is best for us, but I want to point out that we already do compensate the public when a private citizen occupies a piece of land. There is a mechanism for this that we can look at that will get us in the ballpark for RPP pricing. And I'm talking, of course, about the 1.4% tax on land that all landowners pay as part of their property tax. So what I would like to show you is what an RPP would cost if we set the RPP annual fee to 1.4% of the value of the land a parking space takes up, which is about 160 square feet. So in other words, if you owned 100 square feet of vacant land in a given RPP zone, what would your property tax be each year? I've analyzed this with both OPA's assessments and my own independent model of land values. I'll be happy to answer questions about the details and differences between these approaches, but they both generally lead to the same conclusions. So if you look at the map that's projected, and I believe you all also have a copy of this, there's a map for OPA and a map for my independent model, but if you look just at the OPA map, you can see that the tax liability on a parking space worth of land in the Center City zones starts at $202 per year. In Permit Zone 5, it's actually over $400. But then in zones in far north Philly, the tax liability is between $35 and $44, and the other zones throughout the city are somewhere in between. So for me, this all raises the question, why do we so often charge less for storing a personal car, which is often not a necessity in various parts of our city, like Center City? Why do we charge less for storing a personal car than we charge for occupying land for the fundamental human right of housing? Okay? The other aspect here that I want to highlight, I'm sorry, my notes are a little out of order, is that the tax liability on a parking space worth of land is much higher than the current RPP price of $35 per year, and even more than the $75 in Councilmember Squilla's proposed bill, but also that liability varies greatly throughout the city. So a flat permit price of $35 or even $75 is therefore a massive subsidy to the richer, whiter residents in Center City and South Philly, and a regressive tax on our poorer Black and brown residents in North and West Philly. So what impact would this or similar methods of pricing have on the problems we identified earlier? Fewer people would use cars, especially in the denser parts of the city that are already congested and polluted and which are most walkable, bikeable, transit-rich, and where demand for parking outstrips supply. More people would use healthier, cleaner, cheaper, and more sustainable modes of transportation, and the remaining RPP holders would have an easier time finding parking in those zones. So to conclude, we again express our support for council taking up this bill. We support capping the number of permits per residence, raising the permit fee, and allowing the PPA to adjust the fee by regulation rather than ordinance. What we advocate for, however, is that we shouldn't charge a flat, regressive RPP fee. Instead, PPA and council should consider pricing the RPP according to market indicators of parking or land value in the different RPP zones and update those prices regularly every 1 to 3 years. This will lead to a healthier, more efficient, equitable, and sustainable Philadelphia for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I mean, I just have one question based on your analysis. For me, this analysis would then create a right to park. If we're charging folks to park based on the value of that land, then it's, for me, we may then create this right? And is parking a right?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think what you're getting at is that like land ownership, which we charge the land and property tax for, that gives you the right to exclude everyone else from a particular parcel. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's not the way the RPP exactly works at the moment. It doesn't guarantee that you can in fact find a space at all. If we increase the price of the permit in the ways that I'm suggesting here, or according to auctions, or looking at private parking or whatever, it would get you it would make more available parking spaces, right? And thereby make it much more similar to you outright owning a slice of the city street, I think.
So then that will only benefit the most wealthy folks in our city, essentially.
So, can you repeat the question, sorry?
So I mean, based on that analysis, it will only benefit those that are more wealthier in our city.
Well, I would say a few things. I think, as a previous panelist mentioned, we can have certain kind of income-based sort of discounts for the price of the permit, like other cities do. I would also point out that, if we think about, again, the streets as public space, right now, people who own cars are getting that space for far less than it's worth, right? And that comes at the cost of everybody else, who doesn't drive, who walks, who rides a bike, who takes transit, who uses these more efficient forms of transportation. So, I think both of those sorts of perspectives are kind of important here.
So what do you do in areas that are gentrifying, right? Where the values are continually to outpace some of the incomes in certain communities, even if they're not necessarily low income, right? But the values are still tripling, quadrupling in some places.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
So what do you do in instances, right, based on your theory here, when the values are outpacing, incomes in certain areas, particularly if they're like quadrupling in certain areas? I know I represent areas of North Philadelphia where my property on my block is assessed at $35,000, to be honest, but there's a house that's being developed that's going to sell for $400,000 on that same block. So then what do you do, under your theory, what do you do then for parking?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. It is a good question. And I think part of the solution to that may, again, come in certain kinds of like income-based discounts. We have certain kinds of...
But I'm not low income, right?
Pardon?
So I'm not low income, so I won't qualify for that discount, but my parking is going to be $120 or, $200 now.
Yeah, well, we have similar kinds of relief programs for property taxes and, certain kinds of things for certain kinds of sensitive groups could be triggered here, circuit breakers, things like that. There could be maybe restrictions on, to a certain % increase per year. There's various kinds of things that we can tinker with, I think. I do think, though, the core of this problem, too many cars for not enough spaces, right? That's because we underprice the permit right now. So I think as long as we have that of super cheap permit price, we're going to have congestion. Yeah.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Council Member Bass.
Thank you. So I just a couple of things that came to mind, and you don't have to respond. I'm not really looking for a response here because we could probably be here all night long. But a couple of things just occurred to me, and one is that in your conversation in the proposals that you offer, I don't really hear what the impact will be in terms of, like, how are people supposed to move around? I give up my car, because of the cost, which is the intended effect, and then what? Because, listen, I think that people have acquired so many cars, and I think that, it's like almost like one car per man, woman, and child in Philadelphia. But people have acquired so many cars because they don't want to ride public transportation. And I don't hear in your conversation anything about improving SEPTA. Maybe it's in your documents, and we haven't had a chance to read them all. But I just don't hear anything that says, this is what is going to happen. For every action, there's a reaction. And so what the reaction will be, how it will impact all of us. And the assumption that, okay, everybody's either going to ride a bike or everybody's going to get on SEPTA are just unrealistic expectations and theories. So, like I said, you don't have to go into it today, but I just would like to hear in the future as we have this conversation, because I don't think it's going away, because we do have a lot of cars on the road and we have a congestion problem. We have a, an environmental problem, which requires us to deal with it. But again, if we get rid of our cars, what are we telling people that they should be doing? And that isn't really a part of what I'm seeing being presented.
Do you mind if I respond real quick?
No, sure, briefly, yeah. You
Okay.
can give us a...
In the spot check report, it talks about parking benefit districts. It's a little bit outside of the scope of this parking permit legislation. The spot check report talks about Portland. They created a parking benefit district where folks who pay the meter, that money goes to that neighborhood, folks who live in that neighborhood, and it actually goes to subsidize the cost of transit passes for low-income folks in that neighborhood.
Well, and that sounds great, I'm all for that, but I think that the reason people don't want to ride SEPTA is they feel that it's dirty and they feel that it's unsafe. And so that doesn't go to address how SEPTA is a partner in this kind of conversation, because it behooves them to have more ridership. They have more riders, and they can hopefully, better maintain the system that they have, and people will feel safe, and they'll have the ability to hire more patrol officers to, be on buses and be on the subway and be on the L and all that kind of thing. But, I think that there's nobody who wants to pay for the cost of a car, insurance, repairs, gas, versus a $30 TransPass or whatever the amount is for a TransPass, a key card. You would probably prefer $30 over all of the other costs. But with that $30 comes so much that people don't want to ride that system. So I think that that has to be a part of your conversation.
Right. Thank you so much.
Just a suggestion.
I'll just add real quick that I very much appreciate that question, and I absolutely agree that I think there's a broader conversation here about sort of improvements to transit. And I will add, and I think one of the previous panelists mentioned, and this is also part of the Fifth Square platform, that if we increase these kinds of fees, right, that's potentially money to go to transit, right? That can make SEPTA a more viable alternative for more people, and we could subsidize Indigo passes. There's various kinds of things I think we could do that make alternatives to cars more feasible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Is there anyone else here to testify on bill number 240335?
I have a Jesse Adamo or Amadio.
Please proceed with your testimony. Come up. Thank you so much. Can you please state your name for the record, proceed with your testimony?
Sure. My name is Jessie Amadio. Good afternoon, Chairperson Young and the rest of the committee members. I'm a board member with Philly Bike Action, which is a safe streets advocacy group. I want to thank you for the opportunity to comment on Councilman Squilla's bill to reform the residential parking permits. And I want to just say that I really appreciated the recommendations from the DVRPC, definitely experts in it more than me. This is more of a public comment and just my experience living in Philadelphia. Like myself, according to census data, around 25% of households in South Philly don't have an access to a vehicle. And neighborhoods in North Philly, that number is sometimes well over 50%. So while there are a lot of cars on the road, there are a lot of people in the city that can't afford vehicles. They're just priced out of that altogether. And we do take SEPTA, and we walk, and we, you know, and we do will wish that it was better funded and cleaner for sure. But that's how we live in this city. And yet, you know, valuable public land is sort of being given away for private property storage. And this sort of dirt cheap permit pricing, and like in some neighborhoods like where I live, there's not much permit at all. It incentivizes car ownership to the extent that like the spots, which are already limited, they're parked to the point that they're overflowing. They're in our crosswalks, they're blocking handicap cutouts. They're creating like a really frustrating quality of life issue. And it sounds like the PPA, as this program expands, like doesn't have the resources to really enforce it the way that it should be. So, you know, I have many friends, I have a pretty good job, but my friends, my peers that live in Center City and South Philly, they have cars, but they don't really use them. They talk idly about getting rid of them one day because they live in transit-rich, walkable neighborhoods. And, but they keep their car for the odd trip, the odd vacation here and there, because it's so cheap to get a permit that they can just, use our streets like a permanent long-term storage parking garage. And those are the people who I think it's a choice for them whether they have a car or not, when there's plenty of people who live in neighborhoods where it's just not even accessible because the cars are taking over the roads, and it's a real equity issue, I believe. And so, I think that I really support this bill passing, and I urge council to go further and allow for progressive pricing. $35, even $75 is still effectively free to a middle-class household in Center City, and they could bear a much higher cost compared to a household in North Philly. And I strongly support the reform bill, and I hope that you'll allow PPA to regulate progressive, equitable pricing that won't overburden low-income residents, but can correct for the massively undervalued asset of public space in high-income areas. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Mason Carter. Thank you so much for having us today. I would like to also voice my support for this bill. I think that as somebody, I'm in a single car household, and but I've also had near neighbors that have had up to 5 cars in the neighborhood. And so I think that having that cap at 3 is really important for this bill. I'd even say 2, but let's work towards that. And hopefully, ultimately, the city can really think about getting to that goal of, if we're going to have people who own cars, getting it down to single car households. And I think that's a really good goal that this city can pursue. Ultimately, $75 makes a lot of sense for the onset of this. I think we should work more towards progressive, dynamic pricing, but when you think about it with inflation, I mean, we haven't had an increase to the permit since like the 80s, and so it really makes sense, especially when you think of it in an equity issue. Transit riders have had fare increases, and we as transit riders spend a lot more than on parking permits, and a lot of low-income people rely on transit, and so that sort of gets to the point as well that we need to think about, besides for increased enforcement, for being able to, so that the PPA can do their jobs and decrease the amount of parking, what are the benefits to increasing this? I mean, for drivers, it's clearly not having to circle their blocks for 15, 20, 25 minutes at a time just to look at a spot. And then potentially using those extra funds towards public transportation. We were talking about how people are less inclined to ride the system because it's not clean, it's not safe. But these are also city issues that are spilling onto the transit system, where SEPTA's become, with the funds that they have, so overwhelmed with that. And so this could be a good potential tool so that the city can increase funding for more frequent cleaning, and as well as increase in public safety. And then, finally, I think that, we clearly do see that, in parking, there's neighborhoods where there's a big crunch. And so I think that, we just have to communicate the benefit to the drivers that, this is something that ultimately you'll get a much better service with your parking permit than currently, where it's not a good service. It takes too long to find a spot. So the price increase will go a long way to help that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any other questions of these witnesses? Seeing none, again, thank you. Mr. Pullen, are there any other witnesses testifying in this bill?
There are no more witnesses to testify on this bill, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Pullen, can you read the list of those that submitted testimony for the record?
Written testimony has been provided by Jennifer Rodriguez of the Philadelphia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce on Bill number 240331, and the DVRPC, Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, has submitted their report, Spot Check Strategies for Managing Residential Parking in Philadelphia, for Bill number 240335.
Thank you. I would like to thank all of our witnesses for joining us today. We will now end the public hearing and go into the public meeting. I note for the record that a quorum of the committee is present. The chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla for a motion on the amendment to Bill number 240282.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer amendment to Bill number 240282. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee. I move that the amendment to Bill number 240282 be adopted.
Second.
Thank you so much. It has been moved and properly seconded that the amendment to Bill number 240282 be adopted. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it. Bill number 240282 has been adopted. The chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla for a motion on the amendment to Bill number 240301.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I offer a technical amendment to Bill number 240301. A copy of that amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee, and I move that the amendment to Bill number 240301 be adopted.
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and properly seconded that Bill number 240301 be amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. The motion carries, and Bill number 240301 the motion has been adopted. The chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla for a motion on amendment to Bill number 240302.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I offer amendment to Bill number 240302. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee, and I move that the amendment to Bill number 240302 be adopted.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that the amendment to Bill number 240302 be adopted. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Ayes have it. The motion carries, and the amendment to Bill number 240302 has been adopted. The chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla for a motion on the amendment to Bill number 240331.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I offer amendment to Bill number 240331. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee, and I move that the amendment to Bill number 240331 be adopted.
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and properly seconded that the amendment to Bill number 240331 be adopted. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. The motion carries, and the amendment to Bill number 240331 has been adopted. The chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla for a motion on the amendment to Bill number 240335.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I offer amendment to Bill number 240335. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee, and I move that the amendment to Bill number 240335 be adopted.
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and properly seconded that the amendment to Bill number 240335 be adopted. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. In the opinion of the chair, the amendment to Bill number 240335 has been adopted. For the record, the chair notes that the presence of Councilmember Kendra Brooks. The chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla for a motion on bills number 240119, 240183, 240184, 240191, 240221, 240239, 240240, 240243, 240250, 240282 as amended, 240301 as amended, 240302 as amended, 240329, 240331 as amended, 240344, and 240335 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the bills numbers 240119, 240183, 240184, 240191, 240221, 240239, 240240, 240243, 240250, 240282 as amended, 240301 as amended, 240302 as amended, 240329, 240331 as amended, 240334, and 240335 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended, that the suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and properly seconded that bills number 240119, 240183, 240184, 240191, 240221, 240239, 240240, 240243, 240250, 240282 as amended, 240301 as amended, 240302 as amended, 240329, 240331 as amended, 240334, and 240335 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of these bills at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. The motion carries, in bills number 240119, 240183, 240184, 240191, 240221, 240239, 240240, 240243, 240250, 240282 as amended, 240301 as amended, 240302 as amended, 240329, 240331 as amended, 240334, and 240335 as amended will be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation. A request that the rules of council be suspended to permit suspended to permit first reading at the next session of council. This concludes the business before the Committee of Streets and Services today. Thank you so much for your attendance, everyone.
There you go. Good job.